Okay, well, thanks, everyone. It is 11:02 on May 12th, 2025. I'll go ahead and call to order the Whatcom County Forest Resilience Task Force. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Just briefly, our meeting objectives for today are to develop a clear path forward for incorporating objectives into the draft plan by the 30th of this month, review the timeline and upcoming tasks, and discuss the draft critical threats. Moving into the agenda, establish we do have a quorum. Reviewing the agenda, are there any proposed modifications or adjustments to the agenda as written? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted. We have review and approve the April 14th meeting summary. Any comments or suggested edits to that draft meeting summary? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve as written.
I'll move to approve it.
Thanks, Jen. Looking for a strong second.
I'll second.
Thank you, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Updates and announcements. Trying to think through on my end. Just a brief Stewart Mountain update. I do have a meeting scheduled with the exec's office next week. Working through trying to end up with a final recommendation from a county perspective on how to proceed. That includes our $5.5 million grant agreement through the Department of Ecology Stream Flow Restoration Grant. And also to try to make a recommendation on what the recommended ownership framework is. I guess Ken can probably speak better to this, but there's been some good activity on Stewart Mountain Phase 1 that the Whatcom Land Trust owns. It's been exciting to hear some of that progress. And we're also in the middle of kind of early discussions around what both cultural access and public access could and should look like on that proposed community forest area. Any other updates from the group, just generally on topic with forest resilience in the county? Go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, just to add to your Stewart Mountain statement, and of great interest to this task force is that one of the main goals of that community forest is to manage it for forest resilience. And that includes also innovative forest products.
Great, thank you.
Is that true, Chris?
I believe that is completely true. Yep. That did remind me, the other update from the county. We had kind of a large partner and stakeholder meeting for the kickoff of the Lake Whatcom Forest Management Plan process a couple weeks ago. It was a good representation from the tribes. Frank Bob was there, folks from the city and the county, Lake Whatcom Water and Sewer, and probably I guess DNR and a few other folks that I didn't know. So that was good, just to try to get all the folks in the room that touched that, and they had their first public facing meeting last Thursday at Silver Beach Elementary School. I did not attend, but I think it went pretty well. And there'll be kind of multiple additional public engagement sessions from the consultant, which is the Northwest Natural Resource Group, as the county and the city move forward with development of that forest management plan. Any other updates from task force members? Melanie, do you have any updates from the consultant team?
No updates. That's not on the agenda.
Okay. Right, we'll go ahead and move into public comment period. I can't see the waiting room. We don't have any public in person. Is there anyone in the waiting room?
There's a few folks in the waiting room. If any of you would like to provide a public comment up to 2 minutes, please go ahead and raise your hand and I will give you permission to provide your comment. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Alan.
Yes, I was just wondering whether there was a definition for the forest that the Forest Resilience Task Force is focusing on. Is there some structure, location, function, composition definition, or just when does a group of trees become a forest?
Thanks for the question, Alan. Is there someone from the task force who would like to respond?
I guess I'll just jump in briefly, Alan. I mean, so we are covering generally 100% of the forests in Whatcom County, certainly making reference to federal landscape. Obviously, we have less authority or control there, trying to keep the majority of our recommendations focused on lands or forests within the Whatcom County jurisdiction. As far as your question on the bare minimum of what is the minimum definition of a forest, I'm not sure we've tackled that point blank, but I think we are trying to address all forests, maybe to a lesser degree, all trees in the county. Any other public comments?
Not seeing any other hands.
Okay,
I think we can move forward.
I will go ahead and take us on to our next agenda item, which is review the work plan schedule. And even though I was listed here, I'm going to pass it over to Melanie to run us through that schedule.
Yeah, thanks. I am going to share my screen for you all so that we can take a peek at our schedule and see where we are and what's coming. Just want to kind of hit the key milestones for everybody, situate us in time. So what I want to highlight here we are on May 12th. What's coming for you all in terms of plan review is secondary review of a lot of sections that you have seen and provided feedback on already. And that includes the approach methodology section, the existing forest management resources section, and the community values section. And so we've taken all the feedback that you provided on your first review, have made some recommended changes. And so this will be the second time that you're seeing that, and you'll see how many of your comments were addressed. There is a new section that you'll be seeing for the first time, the collaborative framework section. Other than that, this is all material that you have already been exposed to and have reviewed. So a few more sections to review. Just a reminder of our timeline for that. You'll have 2 weeks to review the content, and then it'll go to review committee to consolidate all of the comments that you would share with the review committee. And then we'll review those edits and incorporate it back into the plan. Quickly on other content, we'll hear recommendations on how to move forward with the plan objectives today. That's on the agenda for discussion. And you have all worked on developing draft threats, so we'll discuss those in the meeting today. And then many subcommittees have moved on to actions. And the hope is that you will have one more subcommittee meeting to finalize your list of draft actions so that those can be discussed at the next task force meeting. Any questions about the schedule, where we're at and where we're headed in the next couple months? Okay. Not seeing any questions on this schedule. I'm hoping we can talk through as we're moving through here, and we're getting close to having all of the content for the plan and actually thinking about finalizing the plan. I wanted to talk about the process for approving the plan towards the end. And as part of the rules and procedures, group agreements require a majority vote. And so at our August 11th task force meeting, the plan would be to have a motion to approve. And if the plan is not approved unanimously, any dissenting votes would have a couple weeks to write a minority report if desired. I wanted to see if there are any questions or concerns with that proposed process for finalizing and adopting the final plan. Not seeing any hands, not seeing any questions on that. Yep, go ahead, Carl.
I was just wondering if there's going to be any kind of public review of the document that we'll see comments from, and or if there'll be an overall review by the task force, of final comments, and then kind of a disposition one by one of those comments before we get to the actual yes or no vote.
Yeah, so as part of the review process, we'll note in our schedule when the review is the final review, right? So we've got this this rotating schedule through review committee, and we'll communicate very clearly when you're seeing it for the final time. And to your question about public review, this is not going out to the general public for review and comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, Oliver?
Yeah, so if it's not unanimous, what is the time frame on a minority group responding to
Yeah,
the result?
there'll be 3 weeks between the August 11th meeting and when we need to submit the final draft.
And because I raised the question doesn't necessarily mean that I'm proposing they might submit. I just wanted to know for my own scheduling purposes. Thank you.
Thanks for confirming that, Oliver. Yep. Any other questions? I thought I saw a third hand, but maybe it disappeared. Okay. Thanks, folks. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the forest resilience definition. So you all did some great work many months ago, thinking about how this group defines forest resilience. There's been some comments in the draft plan around that definition, and some suggestions for minor revisions. And I wanted to see if there was approval from this group to review edits to the definition within the draft plan as part of your review cycle. So coming back to this definition, but in the context of the plan. I'll ask, are there any folks who have concerns around that? Please raise your hand and share your comments. Okay, I'll take that. Oh, yep, go ahead, Jim.
Well, this is just a small comment, but I'm trying to read the chart that you put out, and unless I printed it 11 by 17, the text is so small as to be illegible.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard for me to comment on. I've been working to print out a copy to see if I can read it better, but I can not read it.
Yeah, that is a good point, Jim. It's really designed to be on a screen so you can zoom in and out of it and look at any particular week. I'm happy to send you the Excel file. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I could
Okay.
zoom in and out of that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll send you the Excel.
But how does that fit into our timeline and any process points of approval? If I can't read it, it looks like I don't know who else could have been.
Yeah, it's I'll email it to everybody. It's what I just had on the screen. So I was showing I was zooming in on May specifically, but if it would be helpful, I can reshare and just show you kind of the schedule for the summer. Would that be helpful, Jim? Or would you like to look at it on your own time?
Because I couldn't Zoom with the file I had, so.
Okay, so would you like me to share it with you, or do you want to take a look at it right now?
Oh, I think it'd be better to share it with us.
Okay, I'll share that Excel file so that you all can navigate
In the
that.
chat.
I can email it to you after this meeting. Is that okay?
Sure, as long as if I find a smoking gun or something in there, that it's not too far in the process to address.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm just seeing a note from Ellen that Steve is having trouble logging on, so just give me 1 minute to forward our link to Steve as quickly as possible so that we can get Steve in here. Actually, why don't I get us set up with our next topic, which is to talk about the plan objectives. And Jen, did your group get a chance to meet and talk about a possible path forward for incorporating the objectives?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Would you be willing to share some of that discussion with the group?
Sure. Unless Brandy wants to fill in at all, I'm happy to share.
Go ahead, Jen.
Perfect. Okay, we made a list. And this is all kind of related to, I think part of it is apologies. We could not remember exactly how the actions and threat structures were going to be laid out with the goal statements. And I think part of that from our memory was maybe it was part of that kind of presentation and then we had to leave the meeting early. So I think it might be good for everybody if we can just kind of review what does that structure look like. So with that too, that's also kind of what we need is if there are, multiple different layers, right? If there's goals, objectives, actions, threats, to be able to consolidate that, we need to know kind of what that structure looks like going forward. So that way, if we kind of combine some of the goal statements, or if we end up combining some of the objectives, we're matching everything in the right location because there are all of those different layers. So I think knowing that kind of final outline and structure is helpful. So that way we know what exactly we're consolidating, if it's just the goals, or if it's just the objectives, or if it's combination, etc. Melanie, feel free and chime in, or anybody else if you have any questions along the way for clarification. Okay. The kind of other one is realizing I don't think anybody has a full final list. There was a lot of uncertainties of are the listed goals and objectives that each subcommittee has, is that the final version or not? And so it'd be really great, Melanie, maybe if you could be able to put together, here's the list, here's the actual one that we've received from everybody, and then to be able to get confirmation from all of the subcommittees that this is for sure kind of that final version. The other, did I hear something? Nope. Okay. The other piece to that is, let's see here. I'm just kind of looking at our list. There are some questions that kind of came up as well on top of all of those is, yeah, kind of looking at, will we be looking at the goals and objectives? And also, are we going to be kind of reframing any of these statements to be more kind of actionable and very specific and quantifiable versus kind of more qualitative? And so if there are going to be more of kind of reformatting, restructures to those statements, those would need to be done kind of ahead of time before we are able to consolidate all of those things together. I think more than anything, our hour together was questions than answers. I think it was questions for the entire hour more than answers. Everybody else, so Oliver, Ellen, and Brandy, am I missing anything important from that summary?
Yes. Well, I don't know if
Good.
it's missing, but just a point is that we went through the process of the full body, or the group as a whole approving objectives and goals, so on and so forth. And it seems that some of our work might modify some of the wording of those goals and objectives, what implication does that have on process?
All good questions and thoughts. I'll respond to a couple and then want to hear from others. In terms of the structure, Jen, I think Kate responded with the format for the goals, objectives, and actions that's in the draft plan that you're all reviewing. While the content isn't in there, there's text that says in the final version, this is what this will look like laid out with goal, objective, and then actions. So I can forward that around so that everybody can see that. And then Oliver, your question about implications of modifying the text that the full group has approved. I think that's a question for the full group as to whether or not you feel comfortable reviewing any modifications in the plan as you're reviewing the goals and objectives and actions as part of your review of the document. So maybe we can start there and hear thoughts on any concerns with slight modifications to goals, objectives that have already come through this group, and whether or not you'd be open to reviewing those changes within the plan as you're reviewing the plan. Yes, Abe.
I feel comfortable doing that. Though sometimes it's challenging to know when something has been revised. So if there's a way to track changes, I think that would be meaningful. And I understand that sometimes track changes get really, really complex to track as a reader, but I do think in this instance, it would be helpful to see where changes have been made and the things that the full board has approved.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Abe. Jim, and then Jen.
Agree with Abe. I think our process thus far has been too much blind people with the elephant, and when we can all look at the elephant together, we might need to make some changes.
Yeah, go ahead. Jen.
Clarification on like the process wise, right, with this kind of additional subcommittee that exists. So I think if we can have kind of that final list so that we're all in agreement of where that starting point is, will be really helpful. And then we can keep track of, what potential edits there are. But kind of back to Oliver's point, as far as the process of approving, if we change things, etc. What I'm hearing is we would just basically tell you, here's what we've consolidated, and then it's up to everybody to confirm while they're reading the entire plan to look at those specifically as well, correct? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to come back to that quickly before Ellen and Oliver. So Jen, if we share this final list, are you and Oliver and Brandy, and I apologize, I think there's a fourth person, Jim. Okay, and Jim.
Tom, but he's not.
Oh, Tom, sorry, I'm reading your lips.
I know, but hey,
Not-
really close. Another
not very
three-letter
well.
first name.
Well, I got the one syllable. Are you then taking that list and making some recommended changes? Is that what you're anticipating your next steps would be?
Yeah, that's kind of the question,
Okay.
right? In order to consolidate, it's knowing the framework. So getting that kind of email from Kate would be really helpful of what that looks like, to then determine specifically, what it is that we're consolidating, if it's goals and or objectives and or actions and or threats, all of those multi-layers. And then confirming that, we're just consolidating, but we want to make sure everybody else has eyes on it too. So having a good starting point and making sure that we've got that process set in place for people to know if there are edits made to them.
Okay. Great. Ellen, go ahead.
In regards to consolidating objectives, sometimes the wording changes slightly because there's good points in both objectives that need to be combined, but they're very similar. And in regards, another thing that we discussed this working group was that the revised objectives that were in the packet 10 work plan or draft plan were all divided by subcommittee. And is that how they're going to be discussed by subcommittee in the final plan? And does that mean that if we feel that a goal or objective should be in a different subcommittee, we move it for that discussion? Is that correct?
I think that's a really good question, Ellen, and I think that that's something that I'd love to hear from this group on, is the way, whether or not it makes sense to organize them by subcommittee. I don't think that that's essential by any means to have them organized that way in the final plan. I think it's helped as you're continuing to work in subcommittees, right, to group them that way so that you're focused in on the same, content that you've generated as a group. And there may be a point as part of this process now of consolidation where that no longer makes sense. So I'd be really curious what others think about that.
Well, isn't it based on how Dave Peterson is writing the plan, how he discusses it in the plan, these different areas?
This is a portion of the plan that I think is really, driven by this group. And so we're really open to your suggestions as to how you'd like it to be structured and your ideas around that. And we're also happy to make recommendations if that's what you're all looking for. Any thoughts, Jim? I know you already had your hand raised, but if it's okay if we stick with this for just a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then, so does anyone have any thoughts on that organization of the final goals, objectives, and actions by subcommittee or by some other structure?
That's what my comment was on.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Jim.
Well, since the major weakness of this document is redundancy among subcommittees, I think that we should let the overall integration committee, whatever you call it, go ahead and resort things under more coherent goals and objectives, and that the subcommittee should then focus on the objective facet. Or excuse me, not the objective, the plan of action facet.
Steve?
Yeah, more or less what Jim said, but with the added qualification that the subcommittees are just a means to an end. They're not they're not the organization of the final report. And it's very possible that two subcommittees would come up with the same goal, objective, action, things, and there's no reason for having them in there twice. So I think it should not be organized by subcommittees, even though I've done a lot of work on subcommittees.
Seeing some thumbs up, some agreement. All right, so let me ask Jen and Brandy. I know Tom's not here. Oliver, do you, as part of your work of consolidation, do you feel like you would be able to think about kind of the overarching categories that may or may not be similar to subcommittee categories, but might differ as you're consolidating and thinking about the refined goals and objectives? Yeah, Jen.
Sure, if I should raise hand with a smaller subset. I think we can easily think about how they might be grouped together, but I think that might be a really good future agenda item for the full group, because I think the 4 categories will, or I'm assuming 4, I just kind of chose 4, whatever the categories, I think will be kind of those larger, higher level bulleted items that'll be really important for the plan. So I think that would be really worthwhile for the group to discuss. That's just my thought. Others? Ellen, Oliver, Brandy?
I think that's right, Jen.
And my apologies, Ellen. I think I've been flipping my subcommittees around, so apologies that I may have forgotten that you were a part of this group as well.
Can we also get a Word version of the, when you get the final list of goals, objectives, and actions from each subcommittee? Could we get a Word version of that to play with? It would be easier for us.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or recommendations related to the path forward for reducing some redundancy, consolidating the group goals and objectives?
I think Abe raised his hand physically.
Oh, I may have missed it. Go ahead, Abe.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find on my screen where I could raise my hand digitally, but yeah, it'd just be nice, I guess, to have on the next agenda a couple minutes for that synthesis team to maybe report out and seek some comment from the full board. It sounds like that's what you're asking for, Jen. Is that right?
Go ahead, Ellen.
That kind of depends on when we get the final version of the goals, actions, and objectives, so.
I think with what we have right now, right, which are goals, objectives, threats, and a lot of the subcommittees have draft actions. I think having the discussion on these overarching categories, I feel like with the information we have, there could be good group discussion around that. Does that sound right to you all? Ellen, no, maybe not. Not sure. Okay. Well, I think we'll share that with you all this week so that when you have a chance to get together, you can think about that, and we'll have time on the next agenda. And if you feel like it's the right time to have that discussion, then we can have that discussion and we can be nimble and recalibrate if it feels like it's premature. Does that sound okay to the group? Okay. Go ahead, Jen, and then Oliver.
Yeah, on that, I just wanted to confirm, do you think we'd get all of those things that we essentially requested by the end of this week? I'm just wondering as far as scheduling our next kind of subcommittee gathering to work on all of these things with enough time.
Yeah, we can share that with you by the end of this week. My caveat would be that let's make some time before we sign off today to hear from all subcommittees where you're at with actions. To see which subcommittees might need to do some more work on their draft actions. So definitely without the actions and potentially with the actions is my response to that, Jen. Okay, go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, just a reminder that threats should be fully addressed prior to a final set of actions. And the way we're talking again is that we're coming up with actions without a final set of threats. And it's just a word of caution.
Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, it'll be good to have some discussion on the critical threats coming up here when we're ready to move on. That's where we're headed. Steve?
Yeah, I this is horrible to say, but in the Climate Informed Forest Management Subcommittee, we're still reorganizing. goals and objective. We're not adding any new ones. It's just that we're still trying to do the kind of, at the subcommittee level, the sort of work that the consolidation committee is doing. In other words, to make our list more logical. And Ellen has already done a reorganization, and I did one on top of hers. And I will try to get this done as quickly as we can. But, you know, in the end, we want to have it right. So as soon as we have that, I mean, obviously we'll go to the, and when's the next time that the consolidation committee goes together? Because that would give us a good deadline. When does the consolidators meet next?
It's chicken or the egg situation. We don't have one planned. So it's kind of, when do we get the information? So then we can get that kind of scheduled too. So,
Okay,
but we
we'll
only have a few weeks. So I would say more than anything, if everything can get wrapped up this week, I think that'll be helpful.
Well, we'll hustle.
Thanks, Steve. So just to summarize our path forward, we'll share what we have with Jen, Ellen, and Oliver and Tom by the end of this week, and hopefully that will include all draft goals, objectives, threats, and actions. Steve, you're working with the Climate Informed subcommittee to hopefully get that buttoned up by the end of this week so that we can share the most updated version of what you're working on with that group. And then it sounds like you all be able to schedule a meeting and start thinking about this consolidation and also the potential categories that these would get lumped under. And if all of that happens, then at the next meeting, this group can talk about some of those categories and make some decisions as a full group. How does that sound to everybody?
That sounds good. Just make sure you have everybody on the list, on the routing list.
Sorry, Brandy, can you confirm you mean everybody on the committee to share
On
that
the-
document with?
The work group, the consolidation work
Yeah.
group.
Got it. Sounds good. And so to confirm, it's Jen, Ellen, Brandy, Tom, and Oliver. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that piece? All right, moving on to critical threats. So the draft critical threats are in your packet. It was the bulk of your packet. I think it was from page 7 to the end of page. Putting these in your subcommittees, and hopefully as you were reviewing these in your meeting packet, I'm really just curious what your general reflections are. And what would happen next is that Dave would incorporate these into the plan and do some of his own kind of consolidating, right, and organization. But I just am really curious to hear this group's reflections on what came up as you were drafting these, what feels really important, and what kind of feedback do you have for discussion as a full group as you're seeing what was generated out of some of the other subcommittee conversations. Yeah, Brandy.
So I'm actually having, I've been sitting on all the subcommittees, and so I'm struggling to tie this back to the work that all the subcommittees did. Can you help me orient me to this document that you shared with us? Because as I said, I'm I'm not sure that I'm figuring out, like, if I look for what the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee put together, if I can actually tie out what's on this document to what they put together. And so on for each subcommittee.
This was from either it was shared directly with us from the subcommittees, or it was in documents saved in each subcommittee's Google Drive, labeled as critical threats.
Okay, yeah, right. But am I missing that, like, where's the labels for which, like, I can see one bit of information that is climate informed forest management subcommittee information, but then I'm not sure where where that ends and where the other ones begin and which one it is that follows. Am I missing something?
I see. No, they are not grouped by subcommittee.
So how are
or
they-
sorry, they're grouped by subcommittee. They're not labeled. So I apologize if that's
It's
confusing.
confusing. Can we get that? Can you give that to us?
Yes, I
Stated?
can.
Thank
But
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
not immediately,
No,
not
I
right now,
understand.
but yeah. Yeah, Oliver.
Yeah, I have some specific comments or additions or clarifications on these threats. If I don't know if now is the exact time to discuss those, but I do have some comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it under the climate informed forest management subcommittee, but I don't see it here. And one threat is lack of willingness of forest managers to implement new management tools and technologies that promote forest resilience.
Is this a suggestion for something to add, Oliver? Sorry,
Yes.
to be clear. Okay. Is
Oh,
that
I've never-
something you can draft in writing for us? Okay. Any other suggestions or comments?
I do have I have some comments in the table that was produced for another subcommittee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, under altered hydrology and the let's see, what is it? Under factors contributing to that threat, should include reduced summer and fall stream flow, because that's what causes a water supply issue, which is an impact to humans. That should be explicitly mentioned.
Thanks for those recommendations, Oliver. Before I go to you, Abe, does anyone have any response or reaction to those suggestions from Oliver?
Noah Dudley here.
Go ahead, Noah.
I just had a general question about these critical threats, about how specific and down to like the nitty gritty, like how much do we lump for split critical threats? Because there are a lot, like Oliver's point is well taken, but altered hydrology does kind of encompass, is kind of a large umbrella. Like how many threats are we trying to identify here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think the intention was for it to be a little bit more broad and high level. Do folks have thoughts on the value of being more specific or being more high level?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, so we'll have lots of actions based on the threats that are presented, but I believe that there'll probably be more actions than threats. And what I'm getting at is, I think we need to be as specific as possible with the list of threats.
Abe, do you have a comment related to this, or is it something new?
I guess it's something new and it's not that much, but I guess I also have a comment related to this. I
Mhm.
agree with Oliver that having specificity is important, and that because if they're too high level, we don't really know exactly where they're going. And yeah, so I think specific is good. Because actually some of these are pretty high level, and my comment was going to be that that there's a lot of overlap, which is great. I think it'll make our lives easier, but as they get more specific, maybe there wouldn't be so much overlap.
Thanks, Abe. And then we'll follow this thread, and then I'll come back to you for your other point. I don't want to.
No, that's right. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Abe. Go ahead, Brandy.
So what I'm getting from this is that you want us to give you specific comments about these threats that have been compiled, and I find it hard to work with a long list of bullet points in a PDF, so it would be helpful to just get a slightly more organized list and in a Word document so that we can try and figure out how we want to recommend changes. That being said, I don't have any specific changes right now, but I do want to say that with regards to compiling threats and how detailed they are, whatever, it's the way that I look at this is that the goals that we've listed, we obviously have goals, and the subtext of that is that there are threats that those goals are addressing. And so tying your threat statements back to the goals that you've set out at the subcommittee level is one way to really center on, the right level of specificity that you need in the threat statements. Now, other people may not agree with that. This is a conversation we've been having in several subcommittees. Not every subcommittee is approaching threats the same way, but I think it's a helpful rubric in my mind in terms of compiling a list of threats.
Thanks, Brandy. Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to comment that the level of specificity, there's an ideal level there. I mean, there are certain technical levels for either threats or actions that are probably beyond this task force. Where to set the ideal rotation length for a particular slope and aspect, or how wide a buffer needs to be. All those kind of things I think are more specific. So the level of specificity, it should be quite specific, but short of the sort of technical level.
Thanks, Steve. I think this type of big picture feedback is what's really helpful at this stage, right? Like narrow level of specificity and things like that. What I'm hearing is that there's some who would benefit from some time to look through this in a more organized or a different kind of organization. So what we can do is group these by subcommittee and send it out in writing for folks to review. And my recommendation would be that this is part of the next review cycle. So follow that same timeline to make it easy for you all, which would mean it would get sent out tomorrow as part of the plan, not incorporated into the plan, but included along with. And then folks are reviewing that and providing more high-level comments about what they're seeing coming out of other subcommittees. And you'd have 2 weeks to look at that and send some comments. Yeah, Chris?
I just had the question, looking at the current list of threats. I know we just talked about trying to move away from grouping some of the objectives by subcommittee, and given that some of these threats are also similar or identical, does it make more sense to try to just start organizing the threats by category, ecosystem, industry, other components, just so we more or less develop kind of like a master threat list.
I like that idea. How does that sound to others?
I think that that's where we should go. I think it's hard for me to look at this list right now and see whether or not the threats that I contributed are there and whether or not they've been modified or whatever. So that's like that first step of seeing a consolidated list and verifying that the information that was discussed at the subcommittee level is being represented in something that the whole task force is working on is slipping through my fingers right now. But I agree with Chris that that's where we want to go, is to categorize threats. And to do that, I think it's important for the people that compiled the threats to say what those categories are that they were intent. When I said this threat statement, what was I really thinking? What type of a threat is it? Is it ecological? Is it a management? Is it a policy? What is it? Is it a land use, etc.?
Okay, so I'm hearing that that's something that, at least for your subcommittee, that kind of categorization would be helpful to come from the individuals who are working on drafting the threats.
I mean, that's how it would work for me. So I know that this is the first opportunity that you've had to consolidate and give it back to us. It's just that it's hard to work with in the format that it's been given to us. So I think there's a little more work to do. And I think that ultimately the goal should be what Chris said.
Okay.
Across all the subcommittees, like not just at the subcommittee level, but like merged across all the subcommittees.
Is this something I can ask subcommittees to other subcommittees to think about? So the request would be to take your list of draft critical threats and add some categorization. Is that something that subcommittees have capacity for to either work on as a group, or I think this could be something that happens in a Google Doc outside of meeting time?
Yeah, may I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
In the Forest Informed committee, we made a preliminary categorization. We called it obstacles instead of threats, but it's the same sort of thing. But we into informational, socioeconomic, and ecological obstacles. And that may not be the categorization that other subcommittees might want to use, but it might be a starting point for expanding or revising a categorization, because those are very, very broad categories. What don't we know? What in the economy and society, the way things run around here, is missing, and what are the problems that are directly part of the state of the ecosystem? There may be a fourth category or something, or you might want to modify these, but we thought about this quite a bit, so that might be a springboard for a more refined categorization.
That's really helpful, Steve. Can you repeat those again?
Yeah, it's in the document, but yeah, I will repeat them. One is informational obstacles. In other words, what do we need to know in order to manage forests in a resilient manner, or manage forests in a way that the forest will be resilient? The second one is socioeconomic obstacles. In other words, what's happening in the society? What are people doing, or corporations doing, or governments doing or not doing, that get in the way of managing for resilience? And the third thing is ecological obstacles. Those are things in the ecosystem itself that, for example, climate change, right? That, but it relates back to an informational obstacle, because we don't know exactly how climate change is going to work, right? We've got models and forecasts and predictions, and the climate models change all the time, and policies change all the time. So as I say, informational, socioeconomic, and ecological. But again, I'm this is what we worked out in this committee, but there may be better ways, or there may be some other category that is in addition to these.
Do folks on the other subcommittees feel like you could start here, and then if you think of other categories, feel free to work with them, but maybe as a more consistent starting point? Are folks willing to start with those categories that Steve just laid out? Any concerns with starting there?
I don't have any concerns.
Thanks, Brandy. Well, we can get this in writing, share it out with everybody so that you're clear in subcommittees. I would say that the ask would be that either during meeting time or outside of meeting time, take your current list of critical threats and organize them by the categories that Steve laid out and add any additional categories as needed.
Just for information, those are in writing in the
Yeah.
packet. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're on page 8.
8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would political obstacles be under socioeconomic or?
Yeah, that was my idea. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, these are very, very broad categories, right? You could call it political, socioeconomic if you wanted to, but they all go together.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Brandy.
Trying to understand how this fits into the schedule that we were looking at earlier. So I would just want to take a stab at this, that by the next meeting, we're hoping to come to the next Forest Resilience Task Force meeting with a preliminary consolidated like recommendation from the whatever we're calling that work group, the consolidation work group. I don't know if that's the right term. And we're having that group focus on goals and objectives first, and then eventually we would focus on threats and actions, or yes or no. There's like, it's unclear to me whether or not we are going to focus on any of those. But if we are threats and actions something that we need to be thinking about before the next task force meeting? If so, the subcommittees need to meet soon in order to do this work so that there's some time for the work group to do something with it in advance of, turning something into you guys at Triangle for the next task force meeting packet. Like, just help me unpack that a little bit so we're real clear and we can all manage independently our schedules to achieve that.
Yeah, let's unpack that. So the hope was to be able to discuss, to determine what our path forward is for threats today. And based on what we just discussed, it sounds like next task force meeting, we're looking at the threats independent of the goals and objectives and actions for now. We're doing some work to group them, but not looking at them in connection with the goals, objectives, and actions for now. In between now and the next meeting, the hope is that this consolidation committee is reviewing the draft goals and objectives and actions and starting to put those into maybe similar categories, maybe different categories than what we just discussed, but doing some grouping and some consolidating. So in between now and the next meeting, subcommittees are meeting to further refine, to do this categorization of the critical threats and to refine the draft actions. And so I think the understanding for the consolidation committee is that the goals and objectives that you're working with are very close to final. The actions that you're working with may be less close to final. And I think the hope is that the actions are really closely linked to the objectives. So any grouping and categorization that you're making to the objectives shouldn't drastically impact the actions. So you should be able to do that work without the final actions. And sorry, I know I'm already kind of getting into more of the weeds, but is that path making sense? Okay, thanks, Brandy. Is that making sense to others? Any questions? Yeah, Abe.
So would it be useful for the reorganization if our actions reference an objective? Like maybe after each action, we should somehow reference the objective so that they can stay together even if they get moved around.
That's right. Yeah, your actions should be closely linked to objectives in general. Yeah.
But I mean, would it be advisable for us to maybe in the same sentence as the action put a physical reference to the objective in case the organizers move them?
Yes, and yes, and as we're talking, I'm going to pull something up on the screen to help with this because I'm visual. Maybe I can just put this in the chat. No, that's not going to work. Okay. I think I can pull this up, but in general, I hope that you're all drafting your actions linked to objectives, but to your point, Abe, I think having each action statement clearly nested underneath the objective statement that it's connected to will be helpful as things are getting, as you noted, consolidated and potentially reorganized. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Oliver.
Yeah, and again, maybe I'm getting up on process, but again, we're talking about, it was mentioned, actions linked to objectives, but really actions are linked to threats and goals and objectives are linked to threats. And again, the way we're going about this is not a clear pathway, the way, in my opinion, the way resilience planning occurs. Just a friendly comment. So we need to, in my opinion, we need to remind ourselves that really actions are linked to threats, not directly to objective.
Thanks, Oliver. Yeah, Carl.
Yeah, I guess one of the problems I'm having, I agree with all the categorization we've talked about, and I think that's fairly easy for the subgroups to do. I'm still having a problem with the level of specificity, because if you look at some of these bulleted threats, they're so huge that I'm not sure they would mean anything. And it seems like what we need is some feedback from Dave. If he looks through the bullets, does he know what we're talking about so he can fill in the text that elucidates those bullets, or does he need more specificity? Because we could spend a lot of time getting really specific and it might not be needed for him because he already has the knowledge to kind of identify the issue. And just to use one for specifics, one of the bullet points says a declining experienced workforce. Well, that doesn't really tell you much of anything. Are we talking about declining number of forest ecologists, or the number of people that want to work in the woods, or the number of people that want to plant trees, or the people that will work in a mill? What level of specificity does he need for such a thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Carl. And I can follow up with Dave. And I'm hearing some of what I'm hearing out of this conversation. I think Brandy said this was part of that categorization will also help. It sounds like if you have something that's nested under a category, maybe in that particular example, not necessarily, but some of that categorization will make some of the some of that specificity more clear, and there might still need to be some work. So I can follow up with Dave and ask that question.
Thanks.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, I got a.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Oliver.
Well, it goes back to our schedule. I'm sorry, but I do have a question about if we're supposed to vote on the plan on August 11th, when will the plan be provided to us that we're supposed to vote on?
That's a good question, Oliver. So you will get the version for final review on July 28th. Yeah.
And that does relate back to our discussion about threats and actions, because there's still a lot of work that can be done on those items. And all that work has to be done in time to put together a complete draft for us to review starting July 28th.
Other questions? Brandy, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some bandwidth issues. I apologize, a lot of delay
That's
on my end. I think I just wanted to say that I think we're continuing to struggle a little bit with syncing up with you guys on structure and, you know, organization. And so whatever you guys can take on to just make that easier for us, and, you know, it'll just help us help ourselves help you in this whole process. Okay. I know it goes without stating. I just wanted to say whatever. And I'm happy to talk offline and help in whatever way if you guys are like, your contract is limited or whatever. I just think, yeah, to use this time productively, that's helpful for us to take that into consideration and do what we can.
Sure. Thanks, Brandy, and thanks for the offer of additional, time and support. Appreciate that. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thanks, folks. Chris, I think we've got the next, we're a little ahead of schedule, but we've got 20 minutes to talk about next steps and meeting schedule. I can kind of just summarize again what we heard in terms of subcommittee work, and then I'll pass it off to you. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, you're on a roll.
Okay, so actually what I wanted to ask this group, because it's not that clear to me, is if I could hear from someone from each subcommittee how things are progressing with actions in your subcommittee, that would be really helpful. So yeah, in no particular order, whoever wants to chime in. Carl, you're first on my screen, so maybe I'll start with you to talk about industry and economics, if that's okay.
Sure, and Oliver and Brandy are here too, so feel free to correct me. I would say our subcommittee is a little dysfunctional just because we haven't had particularly good participation. You know, Oliver, Brandy, and I tend to show up. Other people haven't. We've never seen Tracy at a meeting yet. Our last meeting had 2 people, and we met for about 5 minutes and decided that was kind of a waste of time and blessed the threats and moved on. So we haven't talked about actions at all yet.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. How about climate informed management? Anybody from that group?
Yeah, we have an outline that has all actions in it, but we're going over it individually to kind of reorganize it and finalize it. We had the meeting last Friday, I guess it was, and Ellen has already gone over and suggested a consolidation / reorganization to make it more logical. And I just went over this morning and suggested further consolidation and reorganization, including splitting a goal. But I think it's a much with both of these inputs, I think it makes a lot more logical sense. So I think, pretty soon, as soon as the other committee members have a chance to go over it, we'll have actions to submit to the whole group. So I feel pretty good about it. Ellen, I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I think it's shaping up, and I think once we get some clarification more on actions from some of the experts like Oliver and Noah on some of the hydrologic issues, I think it'll be pretty well complete. So I'm looking forward to this kind of iterative process of going through and people adding logical actions under our objectives.
Mm-hmm. Great. How about forest management coordination?
I think I'll talk about that one also. It's a little bit like what Carl talked about. We've done actually pretty well with threats, but we haven't gone that far with action, and there hasn't been a whole lot of regular meeting. Last time was just Tom and me, and we made some progress, but we are scheduling another meeting. Hopefully. And the week after Memorial Day, so it's still 2 weeks before the task force meeting. And I think at that meeting, and Brandy and I have already punched in our schedules, and I hope the others will. So I think that meeting will give us opportunity to catch up well before the next task force meeting. So a little bit behind, but have a plan to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then stewardship and land use.
I can jump in. I think it kind of goes back to the uncertainty of the structures. So we have them very written, identified in relation to the goals and objectives. So I would say they're pretty solid draft, but it's helpful to know what it's going to look like for the outcome. So I would say probably a revisit and kind of reframing and verbiage of the threats and actions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So based on that, it sounds like most need at least a little bit of time to refine draft actions. Some are closer than others. I think that my request then would be that the consolidation group meet to work on the goals and objectives and recognize that the actions are still in draft mode, and not spend time thinking about the consolidation of the actions at this point. I think it just sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think that it may help also to narrow the focus a little bit on the goals and objectives, and start there. Does that sound okay to that group? Because that way you can get going and schedule a meeting right away and you're not waiting on anything.
That makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as we, like Steve said, we have 3 goals instead of 2 that were in your last write-up. So we can get that reorganization, I think, by the end of the week. Don't you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think so.
On the
Yeah,
climate informed and
unless we have a true monkey wrencher who wants to start over from scratch, but I don't think.
So yeah, so hearing that there's still some refinement to the goals and objectives, and it's hard for us to track that on our end, my request would be that we Triangle will send out a document with all of the goals and objectives that we've received. So our understanding of what that list is. And can I get someone from each subcommittee now to commit to reviewing that list before the end of the week and sending any necessary modifications to me and Kate by the end of the week? I think that will help. So for climate informed forest management, Do I have a volunteer to review that list and confirm any changes by the end of the week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do that. I mean, with the proviso that we already have the actions attached to our revised plan. So maybe I ought to send you that now, even though some people haven't actually reviewed it. But Ellen and I have seen it, and maybe I'll send it to you and with a note to the other subcommittee members that this is just for informational purposes for you. But this is where this is where we provisionally are. Something like that, because otherwise we'll be reiterating stuff that we don't need to. I mean, you'll be working with a document from you that we've already, that we've already revised.
Okay, so you'll send me the updates.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver, if you could go over it, this afternoon.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna raise my hand for, Steve. Sorry that, yeah, if I can have a chance to review it, because it sent it out just prior to the 11 o'clock. I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, because it does involve your the goal or the action dearest to your heart, which I think actually makes it more prominent. So I don't think you'll be disappointed. But
Okay, so by Friday, you'll send those to me, Steve.
yeah, I
in the
hope
group?
before that. I hope
Okay.
before that. But
That'd
yeah.
be great. Okay. Industry and economics. I think that's.
So can I,
Yeah.
sorry, I have been sort of named the lead on this group, and it's unfortunate because it's not my area of expertise, and but anyway, so I suppose that some of the behind the eight ball that subcommittee is in is because of me, because I'm not the best choice for the leader of it. But so I just want to make sure I'm clear that you're looking for confirmation by the end of the week that the goals and objectives that you consolidate are accurate with regards to what that subcommittee has talked about.
That's correct.
I'm willing to do that unless somebody else from the forest industry and economic subcommittee would like to do that. Like, I don't know. Yeah, so I'm happy to do it unless someone else raises their hand.
Anybody else from that group want to play that role? Okay, Brandy, looks like it's you. Thank you for volunteering. And then same request for the forest management coordination group. Do I have a volunteer to confirm those goals and objectives?
Tom isn't here because he like Frank, Bob, and I got mixed up on the individual Zoom links and had to be rescued. And I think that Tom just didn't make it. Probably had something else to do. So I guess I won't volunteer him, but it's I guess
I'll do that one too. I'll just do it also. Okay. I'll do it for that group also.
Okay, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Brandy.
Yeah.
And then stewardship and land use.
Brandy can do it. No, I'm just kidding. I can do that.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, perfect. So yeah, again, to be clear, I will send our updated list. Actually, Steve, if you can send me your updated list by tomorrow, that will allow me to send a fully updated draft list out to all of the representatives that volunteered today to confirm the goals and objectives are accurate. Does that work for you, Steve? And if not, we can, okay, that's great. Okay.
I'll just say to the subcommittee that we're kind of rushed on this, and there are four of us that were really worked hard on it, and that's me and Oliver and Ellen and Noah. So the others haven't had a chance, but I'll just say that, the four of us have been working on it, and please look it over if you have time, because I'm sending it to Melanie tomorrow.
Great. Thank you all. Oh yeah, go ahead, Abe.
It sounds like I'm not the only one that struggles before the meetings to find the individual Zoom link, and I wonder if I could request that we get sent just any link that will get us into this, and you could promote us to panelists.
Yeah. Let me, Kate was out sick today, so I apologize. I know she usually plays that role, and I didn't fully step into that, so I apologize for that. I like your suggestion of having the general link because it is easy for us to promote you. So I will make sure that there's no issues with just putting the general link in the calendar event for you all. And I'll confirm that with Kate when she's back in the office. And if that's the path forward, we can make sure that that happens for you, so that you at least have some way to get in and we're not scrambling 5 minutes before the meeting. Thanks, Abe. Yeah. Go ahead, Brandy.
Just so you know, I have 3 separate links for this meeting that have been created for me by Triangle. So it's a little challenging to know which one I'm supposed to be using.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there is a new link that's generated each week or specific for you as a panelist, and if the general meeting link stays the same. Again, apologies. I'm not
It's okay. Yeah, it's
I'm
okay.
not the
I
one
just-
behind this, but
I think I just wanted to say, like, there's 3 and I didn't create them. So, you know,
yeah,
you
yeah.
might need to cancel a bunch of stuff and then resend something to us so that we
Okay.
can clear
Well-
our calendars and just have the right one in there.
Yeah, we'll get to the
Yeah,
bottom
when
of
I
that.
when I sent out the SOS and Chris sent me one which turned out to be the general one, and then Melanie sent me a different one, which turned out to be, yes, my individual one. But is there any reason why we can't have a panelist link? I mean,
Well,
we do this for other county committees, in other words.
Yeah. You do have a panelist link, and my understanding is that those are unique to each individual for
But-
some
but-
reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what makes it hard, because
Yeah.
otherwise you could send us an invite with a panelist link, which would be different from the public link.
Yeah.
But you could send it to all of us.
Right. And
Uh,
I assume that there's some reason we couldn't do that, but maybe not. And so we'll do a little homework there to make it easier for you all.
I don't see how it would violate open meetings, because the public still gets a link. You
Right.
know, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm not an expert on the open meetings law.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a pin in this if that's okay, because I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of exactly how we need to set this up. Unless Chris or Kirsten, you have any specific recommendations.
I mean, I think the way you had set that up, that was your preference to send out individual links. So if you just want to have a universal Zoom link and just promote each of us individually, you know, whatever works best on your end. You're the meeting host here, so whatever's simplest
Okay.
for us.
Okay. Yeah. Well, either way, we'll find a better solution, because what's happening now is not a good solution. So we'll come up with a better recommendation. All right. Final 5 minutes. I think just a reminder to folks that our next full task force meeting is June, is it the 9th? So I'm pulling up my calendar. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay, so June 9th. And in between then, the work in subcommittees is to continue working on actions. It sounds like most of you all have some work to do with that, and look at your draft list of critical threats and do some organization. The starting point are those categories from the Climate Informed Forest Management Group. So those are on page 8 of your meeting packet from today: informational obstacles, socioeconomic, and ecological. So starting there, group your critical threats, and if you come up with new categories, please feel free to create some new categories and bring those forward to the next task force meeting. So next task force meeting, hopefully we'll be ready to talk about draft actions. So please work with your subcommittees to make some movement on that so that we can have that discussion and confirm the categories for the critical threats. The other big piece of this is the consolidation group is going to be meeting to talk about consolidating the goals and objectives and the categories that they're nesting those under, and bringing forward some topics, some potential categories for discussion with the full group. Anything that I'm missing? Any other topics that folks want to bring forward in our final minutes?
I think we did it.
All right, Chris, back to you.
Well, thanks everyone for attending. With that, we are adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.